Welcome to Art History with Jackie. In honor of Women's History Month, we will be celebrating a few of the many talented female artists from throughout art history. Today, we'll be talking about Emily Carr, a Canadian artist and writer who was known for being one of the first painters in Canada to adopt a modernist and post impressionist style. Carr did not receive widespread recognition for her work until she changed subject matter from Aboriginal themes to landscapes, forest scenes in particular. She was also one of the earliest chroniclers of life in British Columbia. Born in Victoria, British Columbia in 1871, Emily Carr was the second youngest of 9 children born to English parents. The Carr children were raised on English tradition. Her father believed it was sensible to live on Vancouver Island, a colony of Great Britain, where he could practice English customs and continue his British citizenship. Carr's father encouraged her artistic inclinations, but it was only in 1890, after her parents' deaths, that Carr pursued her art seriously. She studied at the San Francisco Art Institute for 2 years before returning to Victoria. In 1899, Carr traveled to London, where she studied at the Westminster School of Art. In 1905, she took a teaching position in Vancouver at the Ladies' Art Club that she held for no longer than a month. She was unpopular amongst her students due to her rude behavior of smoking and cursing at them in class, and the students began to boycott her courses. In 1898, at age 27, Carr made the first of several sketching and painting trips to Aboriginal villages. She stayed in a village near Ucluelet on the west coast of Vancouver Island. Carr recalled that her time there made a lasting impression on her. Her interest in Indigenous life was reinforced by a trip to Alaska 9 years later with her sister Alice. In 1912, Carr took a sketching trip to First Nations villages in Haida Gwaii. Even though Carr left the villages of the Pacific Northwest, the impact of the people stayed with her. Determined to further her knowledge of the age's evolving artistic trends, in 1910, Carr went to Europe to study at the Académie Coloracie in Paris. She was shocked and intrigued by the use of distortion and vibrant colors used by French artists at the time. She adopted a vibrant color palette rather than continuing with the pastel colors of her earlier British training. She was greatly influenced by the post impressionists and the Fauvists she met and studied with in France. She was the first artist to introduce Fauvism to Vancouver. In the summer of 1912, Carr again traveled north to Haida Gwaii and the Skeena River, where she documented the art of the Haida, Gitxsan, and Tsimshian. Carr's paintings of this time were greatly influenced by the indigenous cultures she continued to visit. In March 1912, Carr opened a studio at 1465 West Broadway in Vancouver. However, she did not feel that Vancouver's reaction to her work was positive enough to support her career. She moved back to Victoria and did little painting. She ran a boarding house for many years. Over time, Carr's work became to the attention of several influential and supportive people, including the director of Canada's National Gallery. She was subsequently invited to exhibit her work as part of an exhibition on West Coast Aboriginal art, despite her being a white woman. During this exhibition, she became acquainted with the group of 7, who became important supporters of her work. This led to her most prolific period. Her artistic direction was influenced by the group and by Lauren Harris in particular. She was one of the first artists to attempt to capture the spirit of Canada in a modern style. Previously, Canadian painting had been mostly portraits and representational landscapes. Her main themes were natives and nature. While known as a Canadian icon, Carr is also known for her problematic relationship with Indigenous cultures. There are several questions that arise when thinking of Emily Carr and her representations of Native culture. Did she understand Native culture in the way she thought she understood the British colonial Victoria in which she grew up? Did she understand it in the way a scholar may come to know a single foreign culture after years of study? Could she really have understood and appreciated the native way of life that she so much liked to paint? I encourage you to explore more of Carr's work and reflect on the positive and negative impacts of her depiction of Canada. Thank you, and see you next week.